What's going on, guys? Today we're going to learn how to create a beautiful silhouette composite here in Photoshop. So let's get into it. What's going on, guys? My name's Brendan from BeWellCreative.com, home to editing tutorials, camera gear reviews, tricks, and tips. So before we get started on this tutorial, I just want to say I'm back from my little bit of a summer hiatus that I just went on. But now I'm back at it. I'm ready to go. I got a whole bunch of great stuff in store for you guys. So I wanted to kick things off right with a tutorial that I know many of you guys enjoy, which is a composite follow-along type tutorial. So if you like what we create in this tutorial and you want to see some other composite tutorials that I've made on my channel, I will leave a link for all of those down in the description below. Likewise, if you're wanting to follow along with this tutorial, you can download all of the images for free via the link in the description below as well. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to create a document here. The one that I've created right now is just a standard 1920 by 1080p at 175 pixels per centimeter resolution. For this case, it doesn't really matter what your project settings are, but I'm just letting you know what mine are. So if you want to make an exact copy of mine, you can go ahead and do that. So I'm just going to go down to my downloads here and I'm going to drag and drop all of my images that I need for this tutorial. So now would be the chance that you guys can go and download those photos, and then you guys will be ready to go. Now I now have 3 individual photos here. I'm going to name this first one mountains. I'm going to name the next one to clouds. And then the deer PNG I'll just leave as is. Now I'm going to turn all of these off for 1 minute, and what we're wanting to do here is we're essentially going to be creating a kind of like a forest, and I'll draw out a little bit of an example for you guys. We're going to be making sort of this forest with some trees here and over here. Of course, much nicer and probably a little larger as well. I kind of want the trees to come in and take up all of this area, and then we'll have our little deer sitting right in here. So this will be our deer, and then we'll have all our mountains in the background and our clouds up here. And let's just hope that this image turns out a lot better than my drawing capabilities. So now that we have the rough idea down, let's go and jump right into this. Now the cool thing about making a silhouetted composite is all of our stuff in the foreground has to be black. So we don't really have to worry too much about cutting things out. We don't have to worry too much about details. We can just make it black, and then the background is what we end up editing. So I'm going to delete my little doodle here, and I'm going to first create a layer for my ground. So I'm going to grab my shape tool down here. You can press U on your keyboard, or you can just click down on your shape tool. I'm going to change my shape to a ellipse tool, something like this, and we're going to just click and drag a bit of an ellipse type thing out this way, like so. Now you're going to want to make sure that you do not have your stroke turned on, which is these little gray lines. And so I'm going to just click this little box with the red line through it. That means it's clear, nothing is there. So that's the one I want. I'm going to click that, and then now everything is looking much better. So now we have sort of this hill type thing. Now I don't really want this to be like a hill. I want this to be a little bit more smooth. So I'm going to just click on my ellipse layer here. I'm going to grab my move tool by pressing V, and I'm going to hold Alt or Option on my keyboard, and I'm just going to stretch this out to basically lessen this slope a little bit. And continue stretching there. I'm going to commit to that, and now this is looking a lot better. So now as you see, it's not quite a perfect straight line, but has a little bit of a roundness to it. Next, we can turn on our deer layer, and of course this is pretty large right now, and as you'll notice, there's actually a little bit of fringing around the outside of our cutout here, and so this fringing is actually just a little bit of leftovers from what this image was cut out of. So to fill in that fringing, the easiest way to go about that is we can double click on our deer PNG layer. Our layer style dialog box will come up, and we'll go down here to color overlay, and we're going to make sure our blending mode is set to normal, opacity 100%, and our color is set to black. Now I'm going to go ahead and click OK. Now I'm going to rescale my deer here just by grabbing my move tool, and I'm going to rescale my deer down to something like this for now, and I'm going to put them right on my little slope like so. Just a rough placement for now. The next thing that we're going to do is we want this to look a little bit more realistic, so we need to add some blades of grass along this plane here to make it look as if this is like a field, because right now this just looks like a shape. So how can we make this look a little more realistic, especially because blades of grass can be hard to actually draw yourself. So never to fear, because we actually have this awesome free grass brush tool that we can import into Photoshop for us. So I already have mine imported, but what you can do is you can go ahead, download that brush pack along with all the other photos. And then what you'll do to import that brush pack, once you've downloaded it to your computer, you're going to grab your brush tool by pressing B on your keyboard. We're going to click up here onto our brush options panel here. We're going to go to this little gear icon. We're going to click on that, go down to import brushes. Once we click on import brushes, a window will come up and we're going to navigate to our applications, Photoshop, presets, brushes, and then we're going to drag and drop that newly downloaded brush into our brushes folder here. So as you see, I have a bunch of different brushes here, and one of them is my grass brush. So once you have drag and drop that .abr file into the brushes folder, you'll be able to follow this route that we just did, and you'll go ahead and click open. And when you click open, you'll have a little folder that shows up just like this, grass Photoshop brushes, and when you click on that, you'll have a whole bunch of different options with a bunch of different grass brushes that you can go ahead and use to create grass on our ground here. Once you have imported your brush pack here, we're going to pick any given brush. It really doesn't matter. All of them are grass. So I'm going to go ahead and grab my brush number 7 for now. So I'm going to downscale this brush a whole bunch because right now it's at a massive size. So something in this range, I can use my bracket keys to enlarge my brush a little bit more. I'm just going to be clicking once repeatedly along the edge of my ellipse shape here. Are basically just wanting to create a grassy plane. Once you have put a plane of grass across your ellipse here, we're gonna have to go and pick a new grass brush, so then we don't have all of this repetition. It looks a little bit more random, like grass naturally does. So I'll try this one next. I'm gonna downscale my brush using my bracket keys, and I'm just gonna click along here like so, and then I'll try another brush like this. Downscale that brush one more time, and I'm just going to fill in a few patches here and there like so. So that's looking pretty good to me. Now it kind of looks like we have these random tufts of grass. All the blades look really nice, and this is exactly the kind of look that we're going for. So now once we have finished putting our grass on its own layer here, I'm just going to double click that layer and rename it to grass. So now I don't get confused about what's going on. Next, we'll want to drag our deer PNG layer behind our grass because we want to make it seem as if it's among the grass. So that's what we're going to do in this case. So now that we have our foreground kind of roughly built in, minus the trees of course, we're going to go ahead and start to blend our background a little bit more. So I'm going to turn on my mountain and my clouds layer. I'm going to shift click both of those layers, and I'm going to drag them behind everything else here. So now they're behind our grass and our deer and all that stuff. Now of course I'm going to downscale my mountains just a little like so, just so they kind of fit in here a little better, and I'll stretch them out so they fit across my entire canvas. Next, I'm going to grab my clouds, and I'm just going to rescale and reposition this, just using my move tool here. And we're going to want to change the perspective of this image to make it look as if it's coming out towards us, make it look a little bit more 3D. So to do that, press Command or Control T on our keyboard to transform our layer. You're going to right click, and we're going to go down here to perspective. Once you've clicked perspective, we're going to click and drag out like so. And then we'll right click again, go back to scale. And then now we can do our final little bits of adjusting to make everything fit a little bit better. Once you're happy with that, you can commit to there. We're going to click back on our mountains layer here. We're going to add a layer mask, so then we can non-destructively mask out this top harsh bit of our mountains here. And so I'm going to grab my brush tool, make sure I change my brush to something of a normal brush type. So a circular soft round brush will work just fine for me. Now with black as my foreground color, I'm going to click and drag along my horizon here just to get rid of that harsh white edge. And as you'll notice, we revealed a little bit of this white, which are just the areas beyond the transformed clouds layer. So I'm going to go back to my clouds, grab my move tool, and then just stretch this image out a little bit more just to fill in those sides. So that's looking really good to me right there. And next, we're going to add a little bit of a something just to blend these two together a little more. So we're gonna do two things. We're gonna first change the color of our sky to match with this blue, and then we're gonna add a little bit of a horizon gradient just to make things blend a little better and make it glow. To change the color of our clouds, we could use our hue saturation adjustment layer, but in this case, I'm just going to use my color balance. And just sticking in the midtones, I'm gonna create a clipping mask to my clouds layer. So I'm gonna just click on this little box here. And now you'll notice this little arrow, so that means that we're only going to be affecting our clouds. Now I'm going to add a whole bunch of cyan like so, and I may even add a little bit of blue. So something like this is looking good. I even might just add a hint of green as well. So now our clouds, because we don't want our clouds to blend completely into the color of our mountains here, but we want them to sort of have the same bluish vibe. So it looks like they're coming from the same place. Between our mountains and our clouds here on our layers panel, we're going to create a new layer, and we're going to add a little bit of a gradient here. So I'm going to grab my gradient tool by pressing G on my keyboard. I'm going to go up to my gradient. I want to make sure that I have my foreground to transparent gradient selected. Now with my linear gradient selected, I'm going to change my color back to white, and I'm going to click and drag up into the sky just a little bit like so. Might do it one more time. And there, now we have this nice little bit of a gradient going into our sky. So in this case, I kind of want to bring it down a little bit. So because our gradient is on its own layer, we can grab our move tool by pressing V, and then we can just drag this gradient down to wherever you want. You can bring it up if you want more gradient, you can bring it down, whatever suits your fancy, and that is all good to go right there. And I'm just going to rename that layer to horizon gradient. So now that we have our background roughly dialed in, I'm going to shift click all my background related layers, which is my clouds, color balance, horizon, and my mountains. And I'm going to press Command or Control G to group those layers. And I'm just going to rename this group to BG for background. So now we're going to go ahead and create another layer, and we're going to call this layer to tree. Now you might be wondering, how do you create a tree in Photoshop? You're probably thinking that you need to go find some sort of tree PNG that's already cut out for you, but there's actually a cool feature within the filters tab in Photoshop that allows you to create a sort of 3D model of a tree that looks really good as a silhouette. So to access this, we can go up here to filter, down here to render, and over here to tree. So once this panel comes up, it might look a little bit different from mine, but the tree that I'm going to be using today is called the elm tree. It's just this one right here. You can go through and explore all these other trees and see what one might work better for your image or your vision, but this is just the one I'm going to be using today. As for light direction, it doesn't matter because we're going to be making this black as a silhouette, but what will matter is the leaves amount, because we don't want to have a ton of leaves, because as you see, it fills out the tree a little bit more, but that just means that there's going to be even more just solid black, no detail, no texture, no nothing within our silhouette. It just kind of looks like this big blob. So when it comes to leaves, you don't want to have it at 0 because then it looks like the middle of fall or something like that. But we want to have just a few leaves on your tree, so then you still have lots of texture along the outside and the branches are light and things like that. For branch thickness and height, I like to play around with this. By changing the branch's height, you'll get a little bit of a different looking tree each time. So it's kind of up to you what you're going for. I'm going to go with something like this. I kind of like how it's hanging low on the one side. And then now for our branch thickness, I want my tree to look like it's a bit of an older tree. So I want my branch thickness to be up a little bit more. It's up to you how much you want to have, but I'm going to stick mine right around this area. Now, if you don't like the arrangement of your tree, you can go ahead and mix around this little arrangement slider here. Right now, I really like this arrangement of my tree, so I'm going to keep it as is. But if you want to change your tree up a little bit more, you can just slide around this arrangement and you'll see the difference in the changes that your tree will make. So once you're happy with all these settings, you can go ahead and click OK. It'll add this little 3D rendered tree onto our tree layer here. Next, we want to turn this into a black silhouette, of course. So the easiest way to do that, once again, just like our deer, to fill in the fringing, we're going to double click on our tree layer. We're going to go down here to our color overlay, make sure black is selected, and go ahead and click OK. We're going to reposition our tree to somewhere over on the side here, like so. And I'm just going to stretch out my tree to make it look a little bit taller. So now I would need to make another tree for this side, but I'm going to actually duplicate the same tree. I'm just going to use this other side that's hidden just to make my life a little bit easier. Now, if you really wanted, you could go back into your tree panel and create a new tree on a new layer, and then you could have something totally unique on this side. But just in this case, I'm just going to keep things easy, and I'm going to duplicate the tree that I already have. So with this tree layer selected, I'm going to press Command or Control J to duplicate that layer. Now I'm going to bring it over here like so, and as you see, it kind of looks a little bit like it's a completely new tree because it has this lower dangling branch, and we can do a little bit of a cool thing to change the shape of this trunk a little bit more. So I'm gonna put my tree somewhere in here like so. So that's looking pretty good right there. I'm gonna commit to that, and now we're looking pretty happy. So zooming in, we can see that it's not quite touching down there, so we need to fill that area with black. And also I need to reshape this trunk a little bit just so it doesn't match perfectly with this one. So what's the easiest way to do that while maintaining the integrity and smoothness of our tree trunk here? So what we can do is with our pen tool, we can grab our pen tool by pressing P on our keyboard. We are just going to create a path in the general outline of what we want the bottom of our tree to look like here. So I'm going to extend it starting from this point right here, and I'm just going to click a little to add a little anchor point. And I'm going to just click and drag to curve my lines, and I'm going to create a random shape here going down along the bottom because we want to fill all this area with black, of course. And then I'm just going to click back up the other side, and then I'm going to join in right over here with the other side of my tree. Now I'm going to click across to my beginning anchor point to finish off my path. Now once your path is complete, you're going to right click in that path, and you're going to go down here to fill path. Now once you click that, you'll have a fill path panel that will come up. We're going to make sure our blending mode is set to normal, opacity 100%, and contents. Contents just meaning what are you filling this path with. We're going to make sure our contents is set to black, and I'm going to go ahead and click OK. Now as you see, it fills that whole area with black. If I right click, go to delete path, now we have a much beefier looking tree at the bottom. It's totally up to you how you create this shape, but for me, I just kind of wanted to make the base a little bit larger just to make it look as if it has some giant roots going into the ground or something like that. So now already our silhouette image is coming together really nicely. We have created our nice plane for our deer to stand on. We've added in all our grass that looks really realistic. We've added our deer, of course. Then we've also added these two awesome trees just by a little filter within the Photoshop program. From here, we can go ahead and start to edit our background a little bit more, do some color edits. But the one thing that you need to keep in mind is you don't want to do any color edits to the black, because the black, no matter how much you adjust exposure or the colors, it's not going to make a difference. It's only going to discolor the naturalness of the black, essentially. So you don't want to do any adjustments to your silhouette layers. So to make sure we don't do any adjustments to them, I'm going to shift click all of my silhouette related layers here, and I'm going to once again press Command or Control G to group them, and I'm going to call these to silhouette layers. So now going down here to my BG group, we're going to do some adjustments to the entire group because we're happy with how everything is laid out currently. We just want to do some overall color adjustments. So to make our lives easy, we're just going to do color adjustments to the overall group. So the first thing that I'll do is I'm going to go grab my hue saturation. I'm going to clip it to my BG, so now it's only affecting all the contents within this group. I'm going to go down to my cyans first because I want to try to change the hue of these mountains here. And I'm going to bring up the saturation just to see what's being affected, and double click on saturation and set it back to 0. I'm going to go just +1 point, and I'm going to bring up the lightness of it a little bit more like so. Next, I'm going to go to my yellows. I'm going to bring that up a bit. Doesn't seem to be doing much. I'm going to go to my reds, and as you see, it doesn't really affect enough that's clearly visible, so I'm not going to bother with that one. And I'm going to go down to my greens and blues. Blue seems to be affecting everything, so I'll play around with that one as well. Bringing up that lightness a little, and going down to magentas is going to bring that up. See if that makes any difference just by playing around with my hue slider. Doesn't really seem to be doing much for me, so I'm just going to leave that at 0. Next, I'm going to go to my color balance here, and I want to clip that once again to my BG group. And starting my midtones, I'm just going to play around with this. I'm going to maybe add a little yellow, a little bit of red, bit of green, and go to my shadows, see, and just play around with this as well. Again, there is no real right or wrong to this. It's all subjective, and I just like to just play around with these sliders and see what sort of effects end up happening. It's totally up to you what colors you end up changing and how you go about your color adjustments. So that's looking pretty good there, and now we're going to do just one last little exposure adjustment. I'm going to grab my curves, clip it to my BG once again, and I'm going to bring up those highlights a little, bring down those shadows just to add a bit of contrast to our overall image here. Now the next and final thing that I want to do to add a little bit of flair to my photo here is I want to add a little bit of a sun flare coming through these trees, a little bit of light and things like that. So I'm going to create a new layer above my silhouette layers, and I'm going to create a little bit of a light burst. So just selecting a light orange color like so, I'm going to grab my brush tool, and with a soft round brush, I'm going to just click once, make my color a little bit less saturated, downscale, click again, make it a little less saturated, almost white but not quite, downscale once again, click in the middle, and now I'm going to rename this layer to Sunburst. With this sunburst layer selected, I'm going to change my blending mode from normal down here to linear dodge add. I'm going to drag this up into my trees here, and I'm going to just stretch this out a little. Just to fill in some of the space, so I want it to be spilling over onto some of my branches here. Now I'm going to grab my fill slider, and I'm going to bring this way down. I like to start at 0 and begin working my way up. I'm going to stick it somewhere around here for now. Maybe even, actually, I'm going to favor the one side, so the branches on this side are going to be illuminated mostly, and maybe bring my fill up just a touch more here. Now the next thing that we can do is we can, just to help add a bit of glow to the rest of our branches, we can just grab white, and then with our brush tool and a soft brush, we can just paint over around some of the branches here. And we're going to change our blending mode from normal down here to soft light. Now with that soft light, we can just change our fill all the way to 0, and then we'll bring it up really slowly, and then as you see, it just sort of helps to accentuate that glow a little bit more. I'm going to add a little bit of that white around some of these brighter areas here. And that's looking pretty good to me there. I'm gonna also bring down the fill of my sunburst a little. It's a little bit aggressive for me. That's looking better right there. So just turning off those sunburst layers, you can see how it just adds a little bit of life and light to our image. I'm gonna rename this top one to Branches Glow. So we have now successfully created this really awesome silhouette composite starting from a completely white canvas. Everything that we've made here is just using black and a couple of images, as well as a sneaky grass brush tool to make this harsh edge look as if it's this nice field that our deer is walking on. Now, if you followed along with this tutorial, I would love to see how your images turned out, so make sure to tag me when you upload them to Instagram at Burnwills so I can check them out, send some love your way, and all that good stuff. Now, if you enjoyed this tutorial and would like to keep up to date with all of my photo editing, photography, video, and composite tutorials, then make sure to hit that subscribe button down below to stay up to date with all that good stuff. Anyways, that is all I have for you for today. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial on how to create a beautiful silhouette composite from scratch here in Photoshop. Again, my name is Brendan from BeWillCreative.com, and I hope to catch you back here next time for another new editing tutorial. See you then.